Student protests at Columbia, Kent State, and Jackson State. Student protests at Columbia University in 1968 and 2024 toppled presidents. In 1970, demonstrations at Kent State University in Ohio and Jackson State College in Mississippi helped end the war. Columbia protests represented discontent that ultimately aided in unseating University President Grayson Kirk and U.S. President Lyndon Johnson in 1968, and analogously Manoush Shafik and Joe Biden in 2024. Both Columbia protests were influenced by U.S. involvement in unpopular wars in Vietnam and Gaza and turbulent national elections. Each uprising led to campus shutdowns, NYPD arrests, and incumbent administration turnover, both in New York and Washington. Columbia President Grayson Kirk resigned under pressure after 1968 protests, as did Manoush Shafik under similar circumstances in 2024. Johnson and Biden's vice presidents respectively succeeded them to become party nominees for president in 1968 and 2024, and both lost their bids in the general election. On May 4th, 1970, 4 Kent State students were shot dead by the Ohio National Guard, who fired 67 rounds in 13 seconds on protests against President Richard Nixon's escalation of the Vietnam War into Cambodia. 19-year-old Allison Krauss, 19-year-old William Schroeder, 20-year-old Sandra Schroyer, and 20-year-old Jeffrey Miller were killed. The state-sanctioned massacre of dissenting youth in Ohio prompted the largest national student strike in U.S. history the next day at over 400 colleges and universities. On May 15, 1970, at Jackson State College in Mississippi, 2 youths were killed and a dozen injured when Jackson and Mississippi State Police fired at least 140 rounds in 30 seconds on a dormitory amid campus unrest. 21-year-old Jackson State student Philip Gibbs and 17-year-old high schooler James Green were killed. None of the guardsmen and policemen involved in Kent State or Jackson State faced criminal conviction. A main point of the protests was the draft age starting at 18 and voting age at 21. In 1971, a year after the tragedies in Ohio and Mississippi, the 26th Amendment was added to the U.S. Constitution, lowering the voting age to 18. Richard Nixon ended the draft in 1973 and resigned in disgrace in 1974. Nixon's successor, Gerald Ford, pulled out of Vietnam in 1975. The protests at Columbia and Kent State and Jackson State showed the costs and consequences of challenging government authority on U.S. college campuses. Read more at the JF Blog.